All right, everyone. So it's taking me a little bit. We're gonna do some analysis of the three the third place, second place, and first place winners of the Adepticon one page rules tournament that happened. So this is the next sort of major one here. Um, Slightly different than the one I played in England. It's a little bigger points, but they also had a smaller player group. Still, I've been if anyone knows, I've always been sort of digging into some of the tournaments on my Discord. I always like to get tournament data back and see how armors are doing very well. Um, there's a few things going on here. One, I think that this format is very interesting, sort of combining Grimdark Future and Age of Fantasy. I think in an ideal sense, we would love in the future maybe those two game systems to be sort of split. But that being said, there were some similarities that happened. One of which is that, like the England tournament, we had two Grimdark Future armies place, and then one Age of Fantasy army place. So some of it, I think there we can see some parallels in between them, and we're going to go into that as well. So we have third place went to these Prime Brothers here. The second place went to Giants. How about that? And I think let's talk about Giants because I think that's definitely something that I wouldn't have predicted. And then first place, I don't think is a surprise is Robot Legions. So let's look at these three different armies. Talk about. I didn't know a lot about it. You know, big shout out to Warboss Fitz who got me these armies. So I don't know a lot about what happened. I don't know the skill levels. I would say of the army lists that I did, I looked at all the army lists that were played. I did notice that this did feel a little bit more of a. Some of the army lists were a little more casual than the others. So I still feel that like some things are going on here that I think are very interesting. So the first is the third place in Prime Brothers. So at 2,000 points, I don't love 2,000 points, but I think that the thing about 2,000 points that makes that you really want to do at 2,000, combining squads where you can is very powerful at 2,000, and having sort of a combination of really powerful, hard hitting combined squads versus very cheap, light, sort of chaff squads is very good. So for the Prime Brothers, the first thing that I would say that I noticed is that there isn't any combined squads. Now that could be just the fact that I think like because of the costs on some of them. But I think that like I would have I think for me if I was building this I would have loved to seen if maybe he could have combined these heavy Prime Brothers. He did get third, so let's just go into it. The first thing he did, he has an eradication squad here. Three fusion rifles are great. I mean, I think that it's always good to bring some deadly in a tournament. I think that any sort of tournament, I would always prefer deadly over blast, just because OPR right now does have sort of a big guy meta. So I love the deadly on these guys here. He's then got two units of heavy Prime Brothers with heavy rifles. I don't love these heavy rifles. AP1 right now is especially with there's a lot of Def 2 that gets into cover. AP1 can sort of be negated. I don't love AP1 right now. I feel AP1 is a little overcosted, but he is running two. One of the good things about this squad is that it is again he's running a lot of that 12 to 24-inch range. You can see a lot of his stuff is in that 12 to 24-inch range. That's a good range to play OPR at. I think the moment you start trying to get a lot of stuff in 30 and 36 range, it starts to really get too pricey. But you can run pretty good shooting in this game at sort of that's what I did with my high elf fleets. I ran a lot of sort of close range shooting. So that's what we have here. These are still okay. These can hold objectives. So not bad. He's still running a Prime Master here. And he's given the +1 to hit. I think this is a pretty cute little squad here, where he's just foregoing the ambush. Not a big fan of the plasma pistol and energy sword on him, but I think it's fine. Maybe just for some close range. I would have loved to have seen a more of a longer range weapon here, but that's fine. And then I think these suppressor cannons are really nice. The indirect, it's pricey. I don't know that I would have gone with this one. I think that, especially at 2,000, you really don't need indirect. Still, but it's still a pretty good squad here. I can see how this army did very well, right? Spamming Def 2. The other thing that we're going to talk about here is that this army has Fearless, right? And one thing I always say, like, morale and morale mitigation. Armies that have morale mitigation are just at a big advantage because it's just such a big thing. So I think an army like Prime Brothers, and I've been seeing them crop up in other tournaments, they're doing good. Like, yeah, I mean, Prime Brothers are doing good. There's that, and I think they're a real solid army to play. They're an easy army to play. I think that you still have to be pretty tactical, but they're also just really tough. He then has an anti-grav tank with a deadly and blast. I do like this. So one thing I do like about the tank's very tough. It's pricey, but I do like that he split up the deadly and blast. You can pick 2 units, so it's really nice. The 18-inch deadly, 36-inch blast. So this is I actually like this setup on this tank here, where 2 completely differentiated weapons. He's sort of maximizing. So this unit can really just do some damage, put 6 hits into 2 different units. So I do like it. I think that I wouldn't have gone with a heavy grav tank. I still think that the list is good. And, that's the great thing about Prime Brothers. It's just Fearless and Def 2. It can go a long way. Because all you really need to do, you just need to contest every objective and just grab 1 or 2. And one of the great things about this army is that it really can sort of contest with some really tough units. And then with that, all the units can sort of focus on one objective that isn't being held. So 3rd place, I think, is very good. I think it's a good unit. Yeah. I think for me, the only thing I would tweak in is I'd love to see maybe a combined unit of Prime Brothers, maybe running something different here. But I think still just even just the 6-man unit of Prime Brothers would have been really nice. But still, I think the army's solid, and the grav tank, I think it's going to be really good. It's fast and strider, so it really can just last turn just go wherever you need to. Yeah. Now, let's talk about Giants. So, this is what I would say. Giants are one of those things that I think that if this was a pure Age of Fantasy tournament, I don't know that I would love Giants, but one thing that you're going to see in this unit that we saw in Prime Brothers, everyone's got Fearless. So the other thing, let's talk about it again, morale mitigation. All 3 of these armies, because this have undead, but again, we're seeing it again, morale mitigation, Fearless. It sort of shows you the power of armies that have morale mitigation. And so it's not surprising at all to see 2 armies that have army-wide Fearless, placing top. The other thing that I think, and I talked about this with 3.4, regeneration. I think with the nerfs there was a big nerf in a point increase in poison, and then an increase in points for rending. I think regeneration is now back in the mix. So we have again, army-wide Fearless, army-wide regeneration. The other thing I think this army, so I think the fact that it's interesting that when you combine Grimdark Future and Age of Fantasy, there are certain armies that can actually do better because Grimdark Future armies are more elite. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 activations. If we look over here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 activations. So both of these armies are very elite that maybe in Age of Fantasy, Giants would get swarmed. But in this hybrid format, 6 activations is pretty good. The other thing is that he's got a nice mix of rending, AP1, deadly, and blast. He's got an AP4, so he actually has a nice mix of just AP4s, AP1s, rendings, and he's got deadlies and some blasts. So again, they've got those things. But again, let's look at that again. The parallel, Fearless. Right, and in this particular case, he's got regeneration. And as we can see in this particular army, in this army is a great example. You don't see any rending or there's no rending and there's no poison in this army. So it's showing you that, you aren't seeing as much rending and poison spam as you used to before 3.4, because those have really gotten a little more expensive. He also has brought some rending into himself, but he hasn't, he's spread it out, right? He's got some rending, he's got some AP4, he's got some AP2, so he's got, like I said, he's got enough units that he really, like, a lot of his units can be very specialized. So I think this is Giants, really nice army. Really nice army. And again, what do we see? Morale mitigation. All right, so let's go look at, I think, an unsurprising one, that is Robot Legions. So, Robot Legions, so I think there's a few parallels. One, I think that Fearless is good, but Undead is better. And I think it's unsurprising that the two OPR tournaments that we've had, the first places on both England and in America and different settings, have been Undead armies. So over there we had a Ghostly Undead, and in here we have Robot Legions. And I think that is something to note here, is just I don't know that Undead needs to get nerfed just yet, but Undead continues to just be very powerful. It continues to just be very powerful. And Robot Legions are a great example of that. Let's just look at so he's got, I'm guessing he's just running the Robot Lord and the Tri-Scorpion Lord just by themselves. And you can actually do that. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is 9 activations, so definitely towards the higher end. And I like the Robot Lord by himself. I wouldn't mind if the Robot Lord had a buff, maybe to these warriors, but it's fine. I mean, it's fine. Whether he's in a unit or by himself, it's fine. The Tri-Scorpion Lord, I'm guessing he's on his own, and that would make sense because he's running Deadly on this guy. So I think him as a specialized Deadly is fine. The other thing they're going to note here is this robot. I mean, this is robots. People always say robots are a slow army. They're not a slow army because there's just only certain units have slow. This is actually comparatively a fast army. And so I think sometimes people have told me robots are slow. They're not slow. I mean, they're actually faster than a lot of armies because you can see the rest of the army has ambush and strider. This army is actually faster than most. Just that it has 2 warriors with slow is fine. And it fits really well with the self-repair. So one thing we're seeing here is we're seeing sort of the same thing that the Prime Brothers had. The nice 18 to 24 inch. And this one is actually sticking much closer to the 18 to 12. So that's similar to what I did. I think the 18 to 12 shooting meta is pretty good. A lot of his stuff is 18. He's got one shot at 24. That's a Deadly 6. Yeah, but other than that 24-inch shot, a lot of close-range shooting and a lot of hand-to-hand. He's got Strider. Again, this Robot Legion army is just, I mean, Robot Legions are so good. You can build them a lot of different ways. This way is fine. I love the combined unit of 5-man warriors. I think this is definitely what you do. And I love that he's done a double combined here. I'm okay with the 3-man Tri-Scorpions. I wouldn't have minded if he would have combined these two as well. Maybe split up the warriors, possibly. But I think it's, I don't know, those are just tweaks here and there. I think this is great, actually. This is 10 shots apiece. AP2, 18-inch range is going to be really solid. Also, I think it's really interesting he's running these combined units of 6 bot swarms. Now, I'd have preferred doing that at 3. Undead is much better the smaller the squads you get. So, I think it's okay. I wouldn't have minded if he would have run these as 3-mans. But, at the same time, I think it can work. At the end of the day, you can do a lot with it. It's just a really solid army, I think he's got some Deadly in here. He doesn't have Rending, but he's got some Deadly and Blast. I'm sorry, not really Rending here, but it's just a really solid all around army. But again, we go back to it. What do all 3 of these armies have in common? They all have morale mitigation in common. Fearless and Undead. And I've noticed this in a couple of other tournaments. And it's the reason that, if we're talking about redesigns in the future, I think some sort of morale mitigation is going to be very important for the longevity of armies to compete in tournaments. Because here's the deal. It's sort of what I've said in the past, where a one-off game, you can win and lose. You can win a one-off game without morale mitigation. The problem is that as you play 3, 4, 5 games in a tournament, eventually you're going to have a game where you're not going to roll as hot, and then your armies, if you don't have morale mitigation, your army's just going to fall apart. And you'll lose. And that's one thing that's very different than comparing armies from one-off games. Than when I compare armies, a lot of times I'm looking at them through the lens of a tournament. So I know a lot of people have sometimes questioned how I come up with some of these evaluations, and a lot of the times that I'm looking at it, I'm looking at consistency. If one thing these 3 armies have, they have consistency. That Fearless and Undead, it just gives them a lot more consistently where they aren't going to have units that are wavered, or if they are wavered. And the other thing is that Robot Legions is so great. It's a relatively high quality army. You have some 6s and 4s, but as you can see, the units that matter, they're quality 3 up. And then they have Undead sort of back them up, and they got the self-repair as well. Robot Legions, it's not surprising at all to sort of see that. I think that Giants, one thing that really shows me at Giants, Fearless, but also Regeneration. I was saying this about 3.4. Regeneration is sort of back in the mix. And to have a basically spammable Regeneration army. And then just for primes, Def 2. Def 2 with the 3.4 I talked about this with the nerfs to AP and then being increased in price. Yeah, Def 2 is doing great. These are quality 3 and they're fearless. So just so that's sort of what we're looking at here in sort of the tournaments. And like I said, it's not surprising to me that in both the European and the American tournaments, the number 1 winners in both are Undead armies. So that's a few things to keep in mind. I hope that sort of helped you out in building your armies. And I hope that when we talk about some of the redesigns in the future, we are going to have some sort of way to provide some sort of morale mitigation. Because like I said, if you... The game, it's very difficult for armies to win consistently if they don't have a sort of morale mitigation. All right. Well, thanks a lot, everyone.